Hello! Dragoon is a fundamentals-oriented melee DPS, with strong and clearly defined burst and downtime phases, flexibility and widely applicable mobility tools, and a predictable and understandable GCD rotation. The job places a lot of emphasis on strong fundamentals. Besides a few animation locks, Dragoon does not incorporate complex mechanics or gauges. Instead, knowing how to keep uptime, knowing how to cleanly double weave, and knowing how to use your movement tools will carry you farther than anything else. Let's talk about the pros and cons of the job. Bear in mind that this is not about how good or bad the job is. When you watch this video, Dragoon might be amazing or terrible in the meta, but position in the meta isn't what this video is about. Play whatever jobs you want. This section is meant to help people who may be on the fence about the job understand if they would like it. For pros, the job is very predictable. While the job has a small amount of flexibility in how it can use its off-global cooldowns, you will always hit your GCDs in the same order every time. Flexibility is for suckers and fools. This job is also one of the more new player-friendly jobs in the game. It lacks many job-specific mechanics, and instead rewards the kind of skills that all melee DPS benefit from. The job also has a fast burst phase. During the 20-second burst, almost every GCD will use some form of double weave. If you're looking for a packed, meaningful burst window, then this job has it in spades. Finally, the job is easily the coolest job in the game. You should watch the Heavensward trailer again, do it right now. For cons, the job is inflexible. Many jobs have ways to manipulate or delay positionals so that they can hit them more easily, but Dragoon lacks this ability. In order to maximize damage, the job requires you to be judicious with True North and occasionally greed GCDs, and there isn't a good way around it. Despite improvements over the years, many of the job's off-global cooldowns still have some form of animation lock, and many are forced gap closers. You need to play around these factors with the job, and if you're not careful, they can get you killed. The job can also feel somewhat immobile compared to similar melee DPSs. While it does have the tools to move as it needs to, it requires thought to use correctly, and if used poorly, it can easily get you killed. It's not as simple and easy as many other jobs. Dragoon's basic combo is more complex than many other classes. After the initial hit, the combo splits into two routes, one applying buffs and debuffs, and the other dealing more damage. Once either combo is finished, you can use two follow-up moves. The first requires a positional, depending on the completed combo, while the second is always the same. Completing all 5 hits empowers the first hit of your next combo. It's also worth noting that the third hit of your buff and debuff combo also has a positional. You always want to start with your buffing and debuffing combo. Then, because of the durations of the buffs applied by your buffing debuffing combo, you basically always want to alternate which combo you're doing. You also want to complete your combo, as your enhanced first hit grants you the usage of an off-global cooldown, which we will talk about more later. So, start with buffs, always alternate, and always finish your combo. This will be your rotation on basically every fight in the game, and it's what lends Dragoon its static feeling. Your rotation is set in stone. Your positionals are extremely predictable, but extremely difficult to delay or manipulate. You either hit them, use True North, or lose damage. Those are your options, and it's your job to work around them to the best of your abilities. Outside of your core rotation, you have several other abilities that supplement your gameplay. These are almost entirely off-global cooldown damage buttons, so let's rattle through them real quick. The most basic of these are High Jump, pure damage on a 30-second cooldown, and Dragonfire Dive, which is pure AoE damage on a 2-minute cooldown. Both of these abilities have follow-up off-global cooldowns that are also just pure damage. Life Surge is a bit more complicated. This ability makes your next GCD a guaranteed crit, and it heals you for a portion of the damage dealt. While the healing effect is a nice bonus, this is a damage dealing ability and should be used as such. Its 40-second cooldown and 2 charges allow it to be used frequently, but it should only be used to buff your most powerful GCDs, which is Heaven's Thrust, the 3rd hit of your damage combo, and Drake's Bane, the final hit of both combos. Increasing in complexity, Wormwind Thrust is another damaging off-global cooldown, but this time with an interesting condition. Remember previously I said that every time you completed your combo, it enhanced the first hit of your next combo? That empowered first hit gives you 1 First Mind's Focus, represented by this spot on the gauge. Once you have 2, you can spend them on a Wormwind Thrust. This gives this ability a short but flexible cooldown. You can hold onto your Wormwind Thrust for a few GCDs, and so long as you don't start another combo while already at 2 stacks, you won't lose any DPS. Finally, the most complex damaging off-global cooldown is Gearskogul. On a 60-second cooldown, using the ability activates the Life of the Dragon state for 20 seconds. While in this state, you deal 15% increased damage, and 2 new off-global cooldowns become available. First is Nastrond, the spam ability. This ability has functionally no cooldown, but can only be used 3 times per Life of the Dragon window. Second, Stardiver. This skill functions similarly to Dragonfire Dive, being pure AoE damage with a second off-global cooldown follow-up. The difference comes from the fact that this can only be used once per Life of the Dragon window, and from it being the only skill in Dragoon's kit that has a long animation lock, preventing double weaving. These are all the damaging off-global cooldowns the job has access to, but Gearskogul is one of a group of 3 of Dragoon's most important off-global cooldowns. Those are Gearskogul, Lance Charge, and Battle Litany. These are the most important buttons in your entire kit, because of their damage buffs, and in Battle Litany's case, team damage buffs. You want to hit them as soon as they come off cooldown. These buttons define Dragoon's gameplay. Lance Charge and Gearskogul's 1-minute cooldown and Battle Litany's 2-minute cooldown give you very defined 1-minute and 2-minute burst phases. Between burst phases, you want to save up charges and avoid drifting cooldowns so that all your damaging abilities are ready to spend during your next burst window. This all boils down to a very structured and modal playstyle. You work through your 2 combos at predictable speeds, landing positionals when you need to. Then, every minute, you use your damage buff, then use as many off-global cooldown damage buttons within your buffed time as possible, before recovering your cooldowns between bursts. Since your abilities have either 30, 60, or 120 second cooldowns, if all abilities are used as soon as they are available, they will always nest cleanly into each other. Life Surge is the only exception, but only partly. Its 40-second cooldown makes it seem like it would break this pattern, but it can store multiple charges. Instead, you simply use 1 charge during your 1-minute burst, and 2 during your 2-minute burst, and everything works out. Stardiver is also a little unique, in that it cannot be double weaved because of its long animation lock, but otherwise it's just pure damage to be hit during burst windows. This is what I mean when I say Dragoon is very fundamentals oriented. You don't have to worry about weird cooldown times or complex interlocking mechanics. The previously described specifics are as complicated as it gets. The major challenges of the job focus around consistently hitting positionals, preventing drift, and avoiding lost uptime. These are obviously factors for all jobs, but for Dragoon, its rigid rotation and packed damage windows grant it significantly reduced flexibility compared to other melee jobs. This heightens the importance of these more fundamental aspects of the job, and if you enjoy that, Dragoon will serve you well. Beyond its core, Dragoon has a few supplemental features. This includes the sexiest trailer in the game. Did you watch it yet? I told you to watch it earlier. Piercing Talon is your ranged GCD, and for that function, it serves well. It's best to avoid using if you can, but if you can't, it won't interrupt your combo and can give you damage at range. However, the job's most important supplemental abilities are Elusive Jump and Winged Glide. These abilities are movement tools. Elusive Jump moves you directly backwards, while Winged Glide brings you to an enemy's side. Maximizing Dragoon damage and uptime revolves heavily around these skills and using them intelligently. Elusive Jump in particular is a standout. I feel like newer Dragoon players underutilize it. On the surface, it just seems like a gap maker. If the boss is about to do a point-blank AoE, you can escape later than anyone else. However, upon inspection, you'll notice that Elusive Jump has half the cooldown of its more direct companion. This seems like a weird choice until you remember one simple but surprisingly overlooked fact. You can turn around. An ability that was once a disengage tool can suddenly become a low cooldown engage tool with a bit of finesse. Without relying on this, Dragoon can sometimes feel immobile, with only one long cooldown dash. However, adding aggressive elusive jumps to your skill set gives the job a significantly increased amount of mobility that rewards having good control of your character, another fundamental this job rewards. So, with all that out of the way, let's talk about burst phase and openers. Dragoon is one of the jobs whose burst phase and opener are highly reminiscent of each other, so we can talk about them together. Dragoon has a lot of buttons to hit during its burst, 15 total off global cooldowns including damage buffs, so how do we know what order to hit these buttons? First, and most obviously, use your damage buffs first before dealing damage. This is self-explanatory. Use damage buffs before doing damage is good. Second, when multiple abilities need to be used, it's generally better to use abilities with shorter cooldowns before abilities with longer cooldowns. There are some exceptions to this, but in general, this is a rule because it's much easier to drift shorter cooldown abilities than longer cooldown ones. Since you want to avoid abilities drifting out of your burst window or losing a potential usage during the fight, it's better to use those abilities first before more static ones. Now, Dragoon has an extra aspect dictating its burst rotation. We can divide Dragoon abilities into 3-ish groups. First are our rigid abilities. These are Lance Charge, Battle Litany, Disgoggle, High Jump, and Dragonfire Dive. These abilities have no charges, and as such, we want to prevent them from drifting to the best of our abilities. To do that, we ideally want to use these as soon as they are available. Next, we have our flexible abilities. These are Nastrond, Star Diver, Starcross, Rise of the Dragon, and Mirage Dive. These abilities don't have a cooldown themselves, instead being follow-up actions to other abilities. Because of this, you can delay using these abilities because there's no risk of them drifting if you don't use them. You obviously still want to use these abilities while buffed by damage buffs, but other than that, they can be used whenever they fit during your burst. Finally, we have semi-flexible abilities. There are only 2 abilities in this category, Life Surge and Wormwine Thrust. Life Surge technically has a hard cooldown, but it also has charges. If the ability is at capped charges, it becomes rigid, but if not, it becomes flexible. Wormwine Thrust, on the other hand, is dependent on a resource. So long as you don't overcap that resource, then you can hold Wormwine Thrust. The generation of that resource is also predictable and spread out, coming at the start of each combo. As such, you can delay using Wormwine Thrust for a few GCDs so long as you use it before starting your next combo. Neither of these abilities fit cleanly into rigid or flexible, and that's why they have their own separate category. With these 3 factors in mind, we have rules to shape our burst phase. 1. Use damage buffs first. 2. Use rigid abilities before flexible abilities. 3. Use shorter cooldown abilities before longer cooldown abilities. Combining all that, we end up with a burst rotation that looks like this. We use our damage buffs first, delayed to the 2nd and 3rd GCD so they line up with other classes, shortest to longest, with Disgoggle at the end because it does damage that we want to get buffed. Then we work through our rigid abilities. Once we use one charge of Life Surge, it switches to being flexible, meaning we can delay it for our next powerful GCD. Finally, once we've worked through all our rigid cooldowns, we work through flexible cooldowns. It's important to note that you can't use 2 Nastrons back to back, so in order to use them all, we space them out through our burst phase. Also, Stardiver has an animation lock, so it cannot be double weaved. For the record, it's okay if you have difficulty memorizing this. It's a lot to take in. Just focus on learning the rules of how to use off-globals, and familiarize yourself with what each does, and it will come naturally over time. Finally, let's go over some general tips. First, beware of animation locks. I mentioned this in the cons section, but the job's various jumps all briefly lock your character in place, and in many cases take you to melee range. Rotation shuffling may sometimes be required to keep these abilities off cooldown, and using them while you're running to avoid an AoE can easily result in your death. However, this is especially important to remember when it comes to positionals. If you don't pre-position, using a jump at the wrong moment could lock you in place for long enough that you can't reach the positional before you need to hit it. Recognizing and avoiding this is a skill that requires practice. It's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to have True North cover the positionals in 2 different combos, and its cooldown means you won't have access to it for a little while. If you cannot hit any positionals, it's better to use True North on your buff and debuff combo than it is to use it on your pure damage combo. Because Dragoon focuses on fundamentals, a lot of the tips I'm going to share from this point forward will be focused on general melee gameplay. The last Dragoon specific tip I can give is that you really should watch the Heavensward trailer again. I swear, just do it. Open up a tab, do it right. Remember that positionals do not need you to be centered. As long as you're on the appropriate side, you get the damage bonus. It's best to stand at these rear corners so that minimal movement is required to hit positionals, but so long as you're on the correct side, it counts. Don't forget Bloodbath and Second Wind. Particularly during bursts, Bloodbath can give you a decent amount of healing, which can save you in a tight spot. Just because Dragoon doesn't have any unique personal mitigation doesn't mean you don't have to help your healers out. The same goes for Feint. If you're not used to using Feint, just use it constantly. It's better to use it inoptimally than not use it at all. And that's everything. Hopefully you learned something about the job. If you have any questions, I will do my best to answer them in the comments. And if you would like to see more from me, I encourage you to subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.